and welcome to CommunityForce webinar. As some of you all know that my name is Mehreen Mirza and I will be facilitating today's session. I'll also be answering your questions during the dedicated Q&A breaks, so please don't hesitate to ask anything throughout the session. We want this session to be as interactive and as helpful to all of you. Also with me is Christine Smith, who will be our trainer for today and will walk us through all the key areas under today's topic. But before we get started, while others join, let us show you a few key features that will help you make the most of today's webinar. Now, on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a panel with an orange arrow. You can use this arrow to expand or collapse the panel. To ask a question, please type in the question area and click on send or enter. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can, either by typing them in or addressing them verbally during the Q&A breaks. And if we miss any, don't worry, we'll follow up with an email after the webinar. Also, a copy of today's webinar is presented under the handout section as a PDF. Click on the handout title to download it. This handout includes help guides and knowledge-based articles for each topic that we're covering today. If any of you have trouble finding the handout, please let me know in the questions box, and I will make sure that I send those over to you through email after the webinar. Also, for a smooth experience, everyone has been put on mute to minimize any background noise during the session. Since all of you have joined, let's get started with the topic for today is Site Administration Part 2, Additional Site Setup Functions. I'll hand over the session to Christine. All yours, Christine. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the session.
And thank you, Maureen, for getting us started with today's session. And so, of course, let's go ahead and get started with the session. And so a brief introduction. This is going to be part 2 of our administration series. So we had part 1 a couple weeks ago. Today we'll have part 2, and then in a couple of weeks we'll do part 3. Where we'll talk about the profile-based settings. But today we're going to talk about some of the additional administration settings that you saw during part 1, and then this will be where part 2 we're going to discuss some of those additional ones where they're those ones that are under the administration tab, and that way you'll get a better understanding of how those are also. So some of the questions that we'll answer today are going to be, of course, how do I change a sponsoring organization? So if you're using multiple organizations and you maybe have multiple departments, and so you have sponsoring organizations, how do you change those? Your academic year, your fiscal awarding period, how do you determine what period your application is using? And then where is it getting that information from? How does it know what your academic period is? So when we talk about academic period, we'll get into what we're talking about with that. And then how do you create status details if you're wanting to use that? Or maybe you have a bunch of status details you don't want to use anymore. How do you deactivate them? And then also, can I change pop-up messages that you see pop up? So a lot of times you'll see those little green or those gray messages pop up. How do you change those? Can those be changed? Can the verbiage of those be changed for something more applicable to my administrators? So that'll be some of the things that we'll be answering in today's session. And so who's going to benefit? Since this is in the administration tab, then of course only global administrators have access to that administration tab. So those are going to be the ones that are going to benefit from today's session. You're the ones that are responsible for site maintenance, setting up the site, making sure appropriate settings are set that are universal on your site itself. And so that's what we'll be covering is universal settings for today's session, things that affect the entire site, not just specific applications, but the entire site itself. And so on the topics, of course, sponsoring organizations we'll talk about, then we'll talk about fiscal year, academic year. We'll talk about search filters, what those are, and then we'll take a quick break and Maureen will answer any questions that came about during those 3 topics. She'll do a quick Q&A and review those questions and answers. And then after that, we'll continue on with the status details, setting a master template, managing control labels, and managing system messages. And then we'll take a nice final break Maureen will answer any additional questions that came about during that discussion, and then we will close for the session for today. So the first topic we want to discuss is sponsoring organization. So first of all, some of our users, you have organization processes with multiple applications, and each application, multiple applications may fall within different departments of your organization, especially if you're a university. You might have a department that has its own group of scholarships, another department that has its own group of scholarships, or maybe you're an organization, you're a foundation, and you have multiple foundations that you're maintaining the sites for as well. You're all using the same site, but how do you differentiate applications and funds and users by each individual organization? Well, that's where sponsoring organization comes in. And sponsoring organizations are how you identify an application, a funding source, and users to specific organizations so that they can only access information based on the organizations that they're linked to. So to create sponsoring organizations, let me go to the site here. And under the administration, I'm logged in on the scholarship site, but if you are a grant user, know that this is the same process for scholarships and grants. You're going to be using the same functionality, the same screens. So under administration here, you'll have this menu option here, and if it's not expanded, you can go ahead and hit the expansion arrow to open it. And so here under, this is manage sponsoring organizations. Now this isn't to get confused with your organization. Of course, whenever you get your site, you will have at least one sponsoring organization here. And if you're only responsible for the one, then of course you do have to have your organization's information listed as a sponsoring org. Because when you create your fund, when you create your application, and when you create users, it does require that you tie them to a sponsoring organization. So of course you do have to have at least the one for your organization. But of course you can see here I have multiple ones. And so if you have multiple, then you can go ahead and add them here. It's a very simple process. So when you first come in here, you'll notice at the very top here, it's blank. And so if you wanted to add a sponsoring organization, it's just a matter of putting the name, some information about it so you know what its purpose is. And then you also can put a logo to it. Now, don't get this confused with the logo that was in the site setup. That logo is the logo that's on the actual page when you go to the site. This is a logo that when you're identifying funding sources on your search page, where they see the listing of the funding sources, if you add a logo and that specific application and funding source is tied to this organization, it will show that logo on that search page. So if you want to add a logo, then you can just click the upload logo. And then once you enter the data, you hit save, and then it'll fall down here in the bottom section here. And then of course, you do have a delete. However, if you're using sponsoring organizations and you've used a sponsoring organization, do not delete it. If you delete it, it'll remove it from all of the data, all its applications, its funding sources, and all the users. It'll be removed from all of those, and you won't be able to identify them with anything. They'll be gone. So that's a very big caution. Do not delete these if you've been using them. And then of course, if you want to edit one, maybe the name changes or the logo changes, then you can just go ahead and hit the edit button next to that. And then you'll notice when you hit the edit button, it will bring it up at the top of the page. And so here you can see I have this organization, Main Institution Campus, and it does have a logo. And so just so you can see where this logo shows up, I'm just going to go out here. And then of course, if you make any changes here, you do want to hit save, and then that'll save them. So that's pretty much sponsoring organizations. So to see where it shows up, let's go to the home page here. Let's go to my search screen, which is what the applicants would see when they're searching for funding. And so this is that search screen that they come to. I'm going to go view all funding opportunities. And you'll see if I scroll down here, you'll see some of these have logos. Well, that's because it's picking up that logo from that sponsoring organization. And then of course, this funding source when I created it, I told it it belonged to that specific sponsoring organization. And so then it knows when it's displaying that fund on this screen to display the logo as well. So when we say that the funding, the sponsoring organization gets added in 3 different locations, where those locations are first of all, let's go to the funding source. So anytime you create a fund, that fund is tied to a specific organization. So if I go in here to the edit of this fund, so you can see where that is, let's go click on it here. Now, this is just a posting fund, but if I go into the edit, at any time you create a new fund, you do have a sponsoring organization. It's right here. And then this is where you identify who has access to this funding source, who is going to be using this funding source internally. This is an internal thing. So anyone who is a user that has CommunityForce, any application that has CommunityForce, and any funding source that has CommunityForce, any user that has that as their sponsoring org will be, excuse me here, will be allowed access to all of 3 of those areas. The funding source and the application, and then the admin, of course, would have access to the user profiles as well. So that's how it identifies it. So if it was just CommunityForce, then only CommunityForce users can access it. So that's what the purpose of sponsoring organizations is. So this is where you set it on the fund. So this is saying this funding opportunity belongs just to that sponsoring organization. Now in the application itself, if I go home here and I open up an application, the sponsoring organization is going to be set under application settings, under general information. And then this says this application belongs to this specific sponsoring organization. And now applications, of course, if you have multiple organizations that need to have access to it, then of course, then you can select multiple and go ahead and click OK, and it'll allow multiple organizations to be tied to it. Say with the funding sources, you can have multiple organizations tied to it. That way, individuals from multiple departments or multiple organizations can have access to this. And then if I go back to the administration then, so that's where the application is identified. That's where the funding source, we showed you where that's identified. And then when creating user accounts, anytime you create a user account, you can go into the edit here on that user account. Let me find one. And scroll down and you'll see sponsoring organization. And if I don't have anything selected, it's going to default all. However, if I only want them to have access to CommunityForce scholarships and funds, then I would select CommunityForce. Otherwise, I would just let it default and it would allow access to everything. So that's how that access would be driven by their user profile and then the organization that they belong to. Now, we do have some users that use the application invitation process. And so what they do, they may not have multiple organizations, they may not have multiple departments, but they want to group their applicants so that they can easily invite them to specific applications. So let's say they have a group of applicants that belong to maybe an arts program. And so they have a scholarship application, or you have a grant application. And so all of those individuals, you might create a sponsoring organization called Arts. And then all of those users, you can tie them to that sponsoring organization called Arts. And then anytime you want to invite them to a specific application, so maybe let's say this application was just for art users. So I don't want to invite all my applicants. I just want to invite a handful of them. And I only want to invite the ones that are arts, but I don't want to have to invite them one by one. So of course, when you're using that invitation process to invite someone to an application, we have talked about that in past webinars this year. So if you're not familiar with that, we do have some linkage to that. And we do have that also, some webinars that explain how to use this. But if you're in the application invitation process and you've identified them with a specific organization called arts, then you can come here and filter, and you can filter by sponsoring organization and then select that grouping, click OK, and then it'll only give you that group of applicants that match that sponsoring organization. You can do a select all, then move them all to the right, and then it'll immediately invite all of them. That way you're not going one by one and adding them to that specific application form. So that's another way some of our users use that sponsoring organization also. Now, one thing when you are doing sponsoring organizations on user profiles, if you are a grant user, be very cautious as to where you're entering who the sponsoring organization is, because the only difference is, and we'll cover this again in our next session, when you're creating user profiles on your site, and when you're identifying them to the, with grant users, they're going to have their organization they belong to, which is this one over here. Do not confuse this organization, which is the organization the granting user is from, with the sponsoring organization. Sponsoring organization is your internal organization association, what your departments are called, what your organizations are called. The company organization on a grant site is the company that that individual belongs to. The company organization name in a grant is going to be the one applying. That's the applicant's name, and then this is the user from that organization, of course. So don't get these two fields mixed up. Sponsoring organization is your internal organization. Company organization on a grant site is the actual company that that individual belongs to. So that's one caution when you're using sponsoring orgs on grant sites. You want to make sure you're changing and adjusting the correct one. So that's pretty much sponsoring organizations and how they function. So of course, the next topic then that we want to talk about is manage academic and fiscal years. So what is academic and fiscal year? So if you're a scholarship user, you may have an academic period. That's your ledger, your general ledger, the period of your awarding that you're going to be awarding applicants. Same with grant users, you may call it your fiscal period. So what is the fiscal period? You may be taking applications in one fiscal period, but your awards are in another fiscal period. The awarding is key because you want to make sure that when you're awarding your applicants, you're doing it in the correct fiscal period. So we have a field when you're creating your application, as well as when you're creating your funding sources, of what's the academic period on the funding source. You're putting your monetary amount that you have available to award on that funding source, and what's the academic period you're going to be awarding it. On the application form, you have, this is an application, and what's the academic period that the awards for this application are going to be awarded. Not the period that you're taking the application in, but the period that you're going to be awarding. What's your bookkeeping? What's that fiscal period on your bookkeeping that you're going to be awarding your applicants? So the system has on it, whoops, clicked the wrong here, under the administration tab, where you identify your fiscal period. So some of you have January to December, that's your fiscal period. Some of you have September to August 31st as your fiscal period. So what the system does then is it looks at your application start and end date and determines the fiscal period that it's going to be awarding your applicants, not taking applications, but the period that's going to be when you're on the site and you say, okay, I want to know how much out of XYZ fund I awarded in 2025. So what was your 2025 period? It's going to look out there and it's going to look at your fund and say, okay, for the 2025 academic period or fiscal period, this is what you awarded, and this is the applications you used to award from that funding source. So under the administration tab, you have this selection, Manage Academic Years. And this is where you put the name of the academic period and the dates that that academic period covers. So I'm going to click on Manage Academic Years so you can kind of see. So here, mine just goes January to December. And then this is the academic period. Now, if you come to this and you see that maybe you have September to August, September 1st to August 31st, and it's not right, and you've done awarding, do not change it. If you realize that this wasn't set up with the correct dates, then you need to come and do a support ticket and notify CommunityForce that your fiscal periods aren't right and you need assistance in correcting them. You've done awarding already. You don't want to mess up the periods for your awards, but you're noticing that your start and end dates for those periods aren't correct. So you can notice here, I have my periods here. I can scroll through here. So I have them all the way to 2028. And then what do I call them? Now you're going to also notice, like if you have a fall period and a spring period, sometimes, you know, the spring is being awarded to a specific period, and then the fall is being awarded a specific period. I can actually separate those out if I wish. You don't have to, but if you want to actually separate those, you can. Otherwise, if you have just 127 to 1227, or if you, whatever your dates are, you can put 2027, you can do 2728, whatever you call that fiscal period, you can put that here. So this is just an example. Some of our clients want to split it out and they want to know exactly what was awarded in the spring and what was awarded in the fall. Okay, so this is the award date. So if I was to collect an application today of September 23rd of 2025, but I don't award that until my 2026 period, then when I'm creating my application form in that funding source, I need to make sure I'm not picking up the 24, 25, but I'm picking up the 25, 26, that sort of thing. So now that once this is all established, then when you start looking at academic years, you'll say, okay, give me the awards for such and such period, and it'll give you the awards for that period. So once this is set up, then how does the system know? So the Manage Academic Years is always driven by the application form. However, when you create your funding sources, the very first time you create a new fund, you do have to identify a fiscal period for that fund. Once you tie it to an application, whatever the application says, that's where it's going to pick up that period. But whenever you create a new fund, a brand new one, then of course, I'm just going to go to the edit here. When you create a new fund in the edit, and you're creating your fund, you're going to see an annual budget academic year. So right now it's showing 22-23. I had $0 budgeted for that period. For each one, if I click over here on this green arrow, you can see, okay, 21-22, none of these this was a posting fund, so there's no awarding out of it. But anytime you create a new fund, you want to make sure, one, you've created the correct fiscal period. So when you first create it, you just come here, hit that plus sign, hit the fiscal period. So if I wanted to do one for 25-26, and maybe I wanted, you know, 100,000 available, that's how much I had allocated, then I would put that figure and then I would close it, and then it would save that information as soon as I hit the plus sign. You'd hit the plus sign to add it, and then it would add it to there. Okay. And then when you add it to the fund, of course it knows, okay, now I know that period's been set up. However, when you add it to the application, it's going to look at the application, and again, it's going to see to return funds for you to select. It's going to say, is there a fund that has the same academic period as this application? If it doesn't, it's not going to show that fund in your drop-down list when tying it to the application. So what do I mean? So the fund, we've created the fund, we've tied an academic year. If I go home and I'm in the process of building an application, so of course, when you build an application, remember when you create a new application, the next step after creating an application is what's the fund that's tied to it? Well, it's going to only return funds that have the same academic year as the one in the application that you created. So for instance, if I go on into this one-to-one application, and when you're building in the application, you're filling out the general information screen. So of course, if you don't get it right when you first create it, you can go to general information, open up general information, and then here is where it determines, okay, the 25-26 period. So I've got my 25 one-to-one application. I'm taking applicants this year. My academic award period is for my 25-26. So what the system's doing, based on what I put here, it's going out to that chart that I just showed you and said, okay, what's the start date and end date for the 25-26? So when I first created this application, if I didn't do anything here, it's going to default, and it's going to look at my begin date here and my end date and say, okay, those are January to December. That falls within the 25-26 period. So any awards I do out of this application are going to be in the 25-26 awarding period. So let's say I don't want this to be the 25 period. I come up here and I can change it to the 26-27. Now, word of caution, extreme caution, if you've already awarded applicants out of an application and you realize the academic year is not correct, do not change it, because you've already awarded and the system's showing the award in the period that was on the original application when you did the awarding. If you change the academic year and you go to look for your awards, they're not going to be there because you changed the academic year. Again, that's where you need assistance from CommunityForce to get everything into the right positions of the correct academic year. So that's something of caution. If you've already awarded and you come in and say, oh no, I awarded in the 25-26 period, I meant to do it in my 26-27 period. That's where you don't want to do that if you've already done awarding. So that's why I'm not changing anything on this, because I've already awarded this application. If I was to change the academic year, it's going to say, okay, you haven't done any awards in that year. If I change it back, it's going to show it as, okay, now those awards, you did award the 25-26. Now let's say you come here, you create this and you haven't done any awarding and it's not correct, or when you first do it, it defaults to 25-26. You do have the ability to click this drop down and switch it to the correct awarding period year. Okay, and then once you create this application, any funds you tie to it, it's going to automatically give that academic year. If it's a one-to-many application process, let me go to one-to-many so that makes sense to you here. And I clone my one-to-many. When I clone it over and I create my new application and I create the award period for the new application, any funds that are already tied to it will automatically roll over to the new academic period that was selected on the application form when you created it. However, when you do need to add a new fund, it's going to only give you the funds. So I'm here in application settings, and I've created this new application. I've tied all the original funds, and so it's going to look at this application's general information and say, okay, all of the funds tied to this application are going to fall within the same academic period that is on the general information of this specific application. So all of my funds that I award out of this one-to-many application are in the 25-26 period. And then here when in my assign application funds, all of my funds, if I want to know what they are, there's all my funds. And of course, right now, anything I put here in the amount allocated and anything that comes out of it that I've awarded is going to go be looking at that general information and awarding it and allocating it based on that 25-26 period that was on the general information. As soon as I tie them here to an application, anything I put here is for the entire fiscal period. So hopefully that makes sense to you. I know that's a lot to take in, but it's the important thing is when you're creating your new application, make sure that you select the correct academic year that you're awarding out of. and then all the funds will be awarded on that same period that are tied to that specific application. So that's academic fiscal years. The next thing I want to talk about are search filters. So search filters are not to be confused with fund criteria within the application. Search filters are for search functionality for when applicants come to your site and are searching for specific applications or specific funding sources that they want to apply to. Then what happens is the system will give them a listing. They can select that, and then when they're searching, it will only return those specific criterias within the search results. Now note there are only 20 available search filters to create. You only have 20 that you can use. And so I'm going to show you here on the site what I mean by search filters. So if I go home and an applicant is on the funding search page, you will see here search by funding opportunity eligibility. These are search filters. This section right here is search filters. You can give them filters to search for funding. Like, for instance, I have majors. So maybe they only have an arts major. They are a graduate student pursuing PhD, and a female. They only want to know funds that are available for that criteria. They can actually drill down when they're searching. This is especially useful for universities because you could have hundreds of applications, hundreds of funds. You don't want them to have to search through all of those. They only want the ones that meet their specifications, and then they can search. So this is search filters. So in order to use search filters, a couple things have to happen. First of all, like we covered last week, a couple weeks ago on site settings, there's a site setting that activates that on that search screen. So that site setting is enable search by eligibility criteria. That's what activates that little paragraph section, that little body of search filters. And then also, you might want to make sure that default before login or after login is the search page so that they get the opportunity to search for specific criteria. Those have to be turned on. Then once they're turned on, you can go over here in the administration tab is where they're located. And this is where you build the ones that you want them to have. So if I go to manage search filters here under the administration tab, all of these are the ones that come on the site. Now you can see they say for future use. And then some of them we have already pre-created for examples for you. So what you do is you determine, as you can see, there's only 20, what you want to turn on and what you want to not turn on. And if you have one that we've got a nice little example, but you want to add to it, then you can just come over here, hit the edit, and edit it. So of course, if you have ones, you want to use the ones that we have already activated or already created. I would recommend using those first and then go to the future use, but it's just a matter of changing what's there. So if I go here to the edit, and this is of course the sort order, this is going to be number 1 in that listing. If it says active no, they're not going to see it. So if you want them to see it, you need to make sure it says active yes. If it's a required, they have to put something in that search field, then you want to put that as yes. Otherwise, they don't have to search on a specific field. It's just there if they want to. Then, of course, hidden from search, you don't want it to be hidden if you want to activate it because they can't see it if it's hidden, of course. So this is one that shows that it's not active, it's out there, but I haven't used it. Now, if I go down here, here's a good one. This is one that is active that we saw. What is your major? That one was already activated. And if you wanted to, you could change this, but and that's there's no problem with typing over these. But like this one, what is your major? I have it active. It's not required. They don't have to do it, and it's not hidden. So this is what this is how it appears to the applicants. This is how your staff's going to see it. And it's given 2 choices for filtering. They can have a drop-down list, or it can be a list where they can select multiple items. So maybe they have multiple things that they're looking for scholarships, maybe multiple majors they're looking for scholarships, then you can change it to a multi-select, and then they can select multiple ones. And then XML name isn't something that you need to have on there. Let me scroll down here so I can get to the rest of it here. Scroll over. And then of course the next field, this is the parameters of the search items that they're going to be given as a selection. Now you'll notice in between each one of these, so I have architect, that's one value. And then there's this little squiggle without any spaces, and then it goes to the next value, and then another squiggle, which is the tilde, and then the next one. So if you want to add to this or you want to remove it, it's always important that you get that tilde symbol in between each individual value. So like this one says sports and exercise science, that's all one. So I wanted to add another one here without a space. You don't want any spaces between the first word, the last value and the new one. We got tilde, you would put tilde in there. You would type in that tilde. For some reason, why is mine not typing in? There it is, there, and then you would put the next item, and then the tilde, and then you would just keep adding to that list, or you can adjust it accordingly. But it's always important to make sure that that separator tilde is there when you're adding items to that listing. So you can kind of see an example here too, how you can add those. So, and then of course, once it's activated, it'll be there on that search page ready for them to use. So once you've got the search filters created, then of course you do want to make sure after you create them and edit, you hit save, and then exit of course will take you out. I'm going to go ahead and exit because I don't want to save what I just did. But you do always want to make sure to hit save, and that will save them. And then as you can see, you've got 20 of them that you can open and close and create. Now once you've created your search filters, if you use search filters, you do need to then go into the Manage Application Funds. And under the Manage Application Funds, under each fund, if it doesn't have any search filter, it's not going to return any results on it. So then on each individual fund, you would need to set the search filter for that fund. So how do you do that? Well, when you're building your fund, or clicking the edit if you want to go back in, you scroll to the bottom, you're going to see a section because you've activated search filters here that has search filters and then the ones that you've activated. So for each one of these, in order for it to return results, you have to go in and answer the parameters for that fund. So let's say this fund it isn't major dependent. So what I would need to do is here, I would have to hit the select and make sure I select all and click OK, so that no matter what the individual searched on, it would return in the results. If this was just for arts, I would select arts and click OK, and it would only return in the results for arts. And so you would do that and then make sure to hit save, and you would do that for, since I have 4 of them, I would do that for all 4 of these, and then I would go to the next fund. And every single fund has to be set up in order for it to be returned in the results. So that is search filters, and I'm going to pause right there and turn it over to Maureen, and she can answer any additional questions.
Sure, Christine, thank you. There we do have some questions. First question is, we do not have a logo for each of the sponsoring organizations / departments in our system. Do we need to absolutely have logos to upload on the managed sponsoring organization? No, you do not need to have a separate logo for each sponsoring organization. It is absolutely fine to leave it just with just the name. It's okay to not have a separate logo, because maybe if you're an educational institute or a university, you will have one single logo, and that's all you use on the website. So it's okay to not add multiple logos under each department. Then we have another question that says, do I need to assign sponsoring organization to every user in the system, or just the admins? Neither. Number one, neither, as in, I'm going to give you precise answers. You do not need to add a sponsoring organization under each user manually. You do not need to do that. However, and even with the admins, you just need to make sure that there is a sponsoring organization or a department, if you have that process in place, to associate the departments with the respective department admins, or sponsoring organization with the department admin. If there are no sponsoring organizations associated with a certain department admin, they will not be able to see any of the applications. So make sure that the relevant, and you can select multiple sponsoring organizations. So they do not need to be only one. You can associate multiple sponsoring organizations with a single department admin. But you have to add those. Otherwise, they're going to come into a blank screen, nothing on their website when they log in. Then we have another question. We are having trouble setting up the academic years. Some of the system is not accepting some of the dates. Well, in this case, we'd like to look at the dates that you're setting up. You need any help, please reach out to support. Our support team, open a ticket with us on Zendesk and let us know what are the dates that you want to set up. Maybe the months have been taken up somewhere else. So the system is not going to allow you to overlap the dates or the months. So just to make sure that you're not overlapping any of the months in the years, in those academic or fiscal years. And if you still have trouble, please open a ticket with us on Zendesk or send an email to clientsuccess@communityforce.com. One of us will get back to you and get your requirements and set it in place for you. Okay, so that's one. Then there is a question which I've answered the rest of the question that through the Q&A box. This one is, why is there information in the search filter setup that does not currently apply to me or my process? Well, when the site is deployed initially, the search filters are automatically activated. If you do not need the search filters, you can always deactivate it, as Christine has mentioned. Just go to manage search filters and go to individual filters and make them inactive. If you still have trouble doing that, please reach out to us. Like I said earlier, reach out to us open a ticket with us on support or an email to client success, and one of us will get back to you and help you with deactivating the search filters on your website. That's from my side, Christine. Back to you. Thank you,
Perfect.
everyone.
And thank you so much, Maureen. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on with the rest of our topics. So the next thing that we want to discuss our search is manage status details. So status details, if you're familiar with our site, you've more than likely been using it. We have statuses in our system, like pending submission, submitted, under committee review. Those are statuses that, based on triggers, the system will automatically move things throughout those statuses. But of course, in between statuses, you may have different stages that you want to tag your applicants for those specific stages. Like, say, for instance, in a review process, maybe you do multiple levels to your review. And so you have stage 1, and maybe you want to put a status of stage 1 denied, stage 1 accepted. Then when you're going and doing your next assignments, you can actually filter by the status detail and only have it return those who have stage 2 or stage 2 approved or something to that extent. So you can create status details for those specific steps in between the statuses on our site. So just so you can see a visual of status details and where they would be on any report screen. I'm going to go into the manage applicants report. And so we have the statuses, that's these here. And then status details are this column here. And with status details, you can create whatever you want to make steps and stages in between the status. So like under committee review, maybe I want to know what's happened, or they haven't been, pending submission, they're not qualified, so I don't want them to come up in anything. Not approved in review process, you can kind of see what those are. So the status details are ones that you create. Statuses are the ones that are canned in the system that you can't change. These you can, statuses you cannot. So to manage status details under the administration dashboard, under manage status details, You'll see when you open this up, there will be some pre-designed ones. If you don't want to use those, then you can just click the edit and type over them. Or if you have not used them, then you can just come here and hit the trash can and delete them. Don't delete them though if you've already used them. If you delete a status detail that you've used, it will remove it from those applicants as well, and you won't have those on those applicants anymore. So if you've used one and you don't want to use it anymore, then what you need to do is make it inactive. And so to make it inactive, it's just a matter of opening it up with the edit. And then where it says active yes, change that to no. Then it won't remove it, but what it will do is it won't be in that drop-down list anymore. So you can, it'll be there for the past ones that you've used, but it won't be in the drop-down listing where you can choose it anymore. It'll just be inactive. So since this does come with multiple ones, you can go in if you haven't used them and you can house clean and get rid of all the ones you don't want, or you can just type over what's there already. It's just a matter of going into the edit, typing what the status detail is. That's what you're going to see in that drop-down listing, a description and where you want it to fall on the listing. So is it number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4? Depending on the sort order, that's where it's going to be in that list. And then just hit save and exit. If you want to create more, because you can see here there's no limit as to how many you can create, then you just come here and click add an application status detail, and it'll open up a field, and then you make sure you mark it active and then hit save, and that will create the new status detail for you. Then once you have these created, then when you're in a report, all you need to do then is it has to be something that you manually move. Applicants, you have to put that status on there manually. But for instance here, pending submission, so this individual here, I want to put that they're not qualified, so I'm just going to select them. And you can do this with multiple applicants. And then I'm going to come up here, hit the filter, and then here's where I can change the status detail. So I'm going to change this to not qualified. And whoever I have selected, it's going to put the status detail here of not qualified. As soon as I hit change status detail, it is going to pop up a little box. If I want the applicant to see it, I can put show applicant or not, and then I can type in here why I've put it. Maybe never submitted their application. Maybe a little note like that. And then hit save. And now I can go down, I can say, okay, they're not qualified. And then over here's my comments. I can see, okay, I didn't qualify them because of this. So they're pending submission, they're not qualified, so I don't want them to come up in any reports. That's the status detail. That's how you add them. And then of course, that's how you create status details to use. The next item we're gonna discuss is a master template application. So if you don't have a master template, you may be asking, what's a master template? So a master template is very important. If you have a master template, allows you to push data from a master template down to other applications like questions and sections. You can push those from you can put them in the master template and push them down. Any question that you've ever created in your application form, you leave in the master template. Once you put a question in the master template, you don't ever want to delete it. A master template is important to have for global ad hoc reporting, because that's where the system looks to create the report. If it doesn't have the field in the master template, it will not return it in the report. So even if you delete fields from an application, but you have it in your master template, you don't want to delete any fields you've created. You want to leave the master template with all the fields, all the sections you've ever created in all your application forms. And then when you have it, all you got to do is make the change in the master template and you can push it down to all the other applications. And if you have it, you can do global ad hoc reporting. If you don't have a master template, you can't use global ad hoc reporting, where it allows you to report across multiple application forms. It looks at the master template, looks for the fields you want to report on, then looks at the applications you've selected to be reported on and looks for that field. If it doesn't see that field in the applications, it's not going to report on it. It's looking at the master template to make the determination of the field. Agency profile, if you're a grant user and you're using agency profile is built based off of the master template fields. It's looking at the master template, looking for those fields that you want to put in that profile. And if those fields aren't in the master template, it will not allow you to put them into the profile. So if you do have global ad hoc and agency profile, then you do need a master template. But I also like a master template even if I'm not using those, because if I'm creating, I have multiple applications and I want to add a field and I want it to go into all 3 of those applications, I can build it in the master template, and with a couple clicks of a button, it'll put them into, push them down to all 3 of the applications based on it being in the master template. So that's why I like to have a master template too. So how do you know if you have a master template? If I go back to the site here, if you go home, more than likely you'll have an application at the top of the page called master template. If mine will go home. Here I have a master template. If you're not sure, you can go to the administration tab. And if you want to create one, you can create one from cloning an application. And then from that application, it'll only be those fields that are in that application that you'll be able to use in any of the other applications. But if you pick an application that has all of your fields that you want, then that would be the best one to pick. Clone it, create one, call it master template. And then once you build that application, you can come here, set master application template under the administration tab. And if you already have one set, it's going to show you right here the name of the one that's current. And then here, if you don't have one set, then you can find the one that you just built, select it, and set it as master template, and that'll be your master application going forward. However, one word of caution, maybe you're like, you know what, I don't like my master template, I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to reassign it. If you do that and you already have global ad hoc reports, or you're already using the agency profile, you're going to break it. Because what's going to happen is it's no longer looking at that master template that you used to build those reports. It's got a whole new one and it doesn't know where to look. So that's where you want to use caution of, if you change your master template and you've already got ad hoc reports, it will break it if it can't find those fields, because it's based off of all that XML language and it's looking for exact matches. And if it's not finding it, it's not going to be able to return results, and you'll break all of those. So if you don't have one, then feel free to create one and come here and set it. Or if you want to know which one is your master template, you can come here and look at current master application and know which one it is as well. So that's the master application template. And we do have training on the importance of using a master template, how to push data from one application to another. So we do have that included. I think it's on the resources for today as well. The next item we want to talk about are control labels. So control labels allow you to change the control name labels on all the tabs located within the dashboards on your site. Now, one thing we want you to make note of is if you change the names of your control labels, which I'll go through what those are, I'll show you those just to give clarification. If you change those names when you enter a support ticket and you've changed it to something else that you use, we're not going to know what you're talking about. So always make sure to make note of what the original labels were, so that when you're talking about a specific area on the site and you've got it called something for your processes, we don't know what that is, make sure that you address it as what we had it called originally. So what are control labels? So up here, home, manage applications, global reports, administration, review assignments, all of those are control labels. All of these are control labels. So you have the ability as the administrator to change these control labels. Now, all of the things that we're discussing today, it's important to note these are universal. So anything you change, if you have multiple departments, you do want to make sure that you address that with your other departments to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Everybody's using the same status details. Everyone's using the same verbiage on the control labels. You know, everything is universal where everyone in your organization is going to understand its purpose and they're going to be able to use it. So here, if you want to change these, it's a very simple. You just come to the administration dashboard and you look for the manage control labels. And then this is all the labels. So in the bold are going to be the ones on the top, home. Bottom navigation links, that's these links down at the bottom, very bottom of the page. Come on now, I can grab a hold of it. Some of these navigation links, you know, maybe you want to change the names of some of those. Manage applications, evaluations, awards, notifications, manage reports. All of those that are bold are usually titled ones across the page, or like if I go into home, I select an application, you have the manage applications tab, you have the evaluations tab, you have the awards tab. So if you do want to change these, you come over here to the edit. As soon as you click that edit, it opens up all the fields. And maybe I want to change one, manage renewal applicants, to manage renewal applications. Now, before you do that, you do want to make sure, like I said, make a note of what it was originally, because that's what we know them as, is the default ones. And then you can come here, you can change the description. You can even change the icon if you don't like what the icon says. And then once you make your change, I recommend don't do all of them at once, just do one at a time. Hit save. Once you hit save, you'll get your system message. So here's a system message that's going to come into play in the next item we talk about. I have my number 115. Are you sure you want to update? I'm going to say yes. And then I'm going to get this little green message here, 116. Your settings have been updated. So I have my messages that popped up, and then I can go and I can see, oh, it did change it. There's the adjustment, and it's got the new name. So that's how you change control labels. It's very simple. Now the next thing, manage system messages. So I just had those messages pop up. I can actually change what those messages say. Those system messages are those pop-ups that come up with the yes, no, as well as the little toast messages, the one that popped up in green. Those are system messages. Now within system messages, so to change system messages or to access those system messages, we're here in the administration tab. We have manage system messages. And then under manage system messages, here's all those codes. So remember when those popped up, I kept a note of what the code was, 115 and 116. So I can actually, I can search for them by putting the code here, or I can scroll through the listing here and find them. There they are. There's the two that popped up. And then I can hit the add edit if I want to edit it as well. I can either search for it and the edit will pop up for it, or I can come here and look for it also. So to edit it, of course, you just open it up and then you type, whoops, I clicked the wrong edit. I hit the one on the translation. I do that all the time. I come over here and let's just search for it, make it easier. 115, search. There it is. I can then hit the edit over here, get the right edit. And now here it is. This is the description. This is the message. If I want to change this message, I can, and then hit save, and then it'll change it to the new verbiage that I put there. Now, one word of caution when changing system messages is an example here in this message 104. In this message, you're going to see something in brackets. That's a merge field. Do not change merge fields that are located within system messages, because that will break the message. Because this is a merge saying that when it shows this message, identify the application name in the message. If you remove that merge field, it's just going to say does not appear to a valid application to clone. They're not going to know what the application is. They're not going to know the name of the application. It's just going to give them a very generic message without that merge field in it. So anytime you see something in brackets in a message, don't remove it. It's a very important piece of information that's merging to something in the system. So I think that is all we have to cover. And so I will turn it back over to Maureen for the final Q&A. It's all yours, Maureen.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, we do have a few last few questions, sorry. Uh, can I have separate status detail options for different applications in our system or different application cycles? No. The status details that you have created are site specific, not application specific. So you cannot have separate status details under a different application pool. So you want to make sure that whatever status details you're creating, they apply to all of your applications, all of your programs, and in different cycles year after year. I hope I have answered that question. Uh, can I delete custom status details and create new ones? Well, you can delete the custom status details and create new ones too. However, word of caution, do not delete any of the status details if you have been using them previously, because that is going to cause a lot of confusion in the system. Loss of data where your applicants were in the previous cycles, all of that will be erased. So just make sure that you haven't used any of those status details before you delete any of them or edit any of them out, because like I said, they are site specific. They will apply to all of your cycles, all of your programs, always on your website. Okay. Then can we have more than one master template for each program in our system? No, you can have only one single master template throughout the website. So if you have multiple programs with different applications, you just want to make sure that those questions, those sections are also added or cloned back into the master template, that the one that you're creating. So that is why you can have only one master template. Can I delete system messages? No. All system messages are hard coded, and each message that you have, the system messages have a functionality associated with it. So when you perform a certain function, the system message pops up, right? So if you delete, of course you can edit those out, but if you cannot delete any of them. So then there is the last one is, can I edit the help text under each control label? Yes, you can edit the help text. Christine, can we go back to the website, please? Because where yes, you see the yellow pop-up that comes up. This is the help text that you've added. So you can definitely go and edit that as well, along with the control labels. Just make sure that, as Christine has mentioned, do not, change the merge fields. Don't do that. I think I've covered all the questions. All yours, Christine. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Maureen, for that fine Q&A. So that concludes our session for today. So please make sure you do get a copy of the handout, because it does have the resources with the click here's that will take you to the items in our help guides. And that way you can get some more detailed explanation of how to set things and how to create things that we've discussed that we don't have time in our hour to do that in. So this will give you more information on some of those items. So we do thank you all for attending today's session, taking time out of your busy schedules. We know that you have busy weeks and busy schedules, and it's hard to get everything done sometimes in a week, but we do appreciate you taking time out to learn about the software that you're using and learn about CommunityForce and how to better utilize it. So of course, there will be a copy of recording of today's session that should be in your inbox within the next day or so. And of course, if you had any questions about any of the items, you wanted to maybe dive deeper into it with your process, please feel free to reach out to Zendesk and request a call from one of our client support specialists to be able to help you answer any of those questions or help you through something. And we'll be able to assist you. So again, enter a support ticket. If you're a global administrator, you should be able to enter that through Zendesk, and we can assist you in any of those areas. So again, we thank you all, and we'll be probably having our next webinar on October 14th. And that's when we'll cover part 3, and we'll get into more of the settings that are based off of profile, creating profiles and profile-based settings that are in the system, so that you can tag individuals with their profiles, how to set those up, and so forth. So we look forward to seeing you all on the 14th, and everyone have a wonderful day and the rest of your week. Take care.